Again, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome. I'd like to introduce myself. I am Clark Lane, and very, very excited that we can have this celebration. Very excited that both the library and the house continue to be part of the landscape of this community, and that the community has supported the library for all these years. I would like to take a moment to acknowledge our musicians this evening from the Hamilton Fairfield Symphony Orchestra. Music near and dear to my heart from my era. This evening, this is a celebration of 150 years of this library. There are dignitaries here that you will hear speak, talk about the library, how the library came about, my involvement with the library, also my involvement with giving throughout the community. But I would like to just take a few minutes to talk about how I was able to get to the point of being able to provide gifts that were supported and some that were a tough time along the way. As with any person in life, as well as entrepreneurs, there are up times and there are down times, and I experienced both. You may have seen in some of the, or read in some of the books that are out. I'm originally from Mount Healthy, not far from here. I grew up there with working with my father, and of course my mother Rosanna. My mother Rosanna is here this evening. Learning the blacksmith trade from my father, John. In coming to Hamilton, I was able to find work. Initially coming to town on the other side of the river, and I believe the building is still there, where I was working on wagons, doing ironworks. But not to bore you with my whole history, I want to really go to the point of how the environment in Hamilton was changing during a time that I was fortunate enough to be in the iron industry as a blacksmith and working with ironworks, when this area and the history of time was moving from agriculture and individual craftsmanship to a mechanical or industrial era. And I was fortunately in the right place at the right time, although not always in the right place at the right time. In individual cases, for instance, having some businesses that did not fare so well in Dayton, but coming back to Hamilton and having support of some other businessmen in town, I was able to start working with ironworks, and through loans from a gentleman who owned a company in town. You may be familiar with the name Milliken, who afforded me a $1,000 loan early on, unconditional loan, I might add. I was fortunate enough to start my own business and also begin to work with other businessmen in the area who were able to take advantage of the industrial mechanical era of town. They were building bars for the jail cells at the county jail, and as agriculture became more mechanized, we were able to take advantage of that. For instance, one of our chief products at our company, by the way, I would be remiss if I did not talk about my partners, Owens and Dyer. Owens, Lane and Dyer was our company. We were actually just a couple blocks over from our location right now, and at that time we had a canal coming through town near where the railroad tracks are. Currently we had railroad tracks there, but also we were able to capitalize on moving materials in and out of town. The waterway came off of the Great Miami, and we were able to capitalize on this factory. We took up a full square block, grew to 4 acres in our factory just a couple blocks over, and then the water was then moved down to the Great Miami River near where the bridge is located. So we were able to build to a point where our threshing machine became something that was in demand all over the country. A threshing machine where at one point they would use horses to thresh the wheat, get the grain from the chaff. So they would bring the grain to essentially a treadmill where you had horses moving the pieces in the thresher and separating the grain from the chaff. We were able to develop a mechanical steam thresher, which became very popular and was used all over the country, was quite in demand. The California chief as it was called, was something that revolutionized what was going on in the agricultural world at that time. We got to move forward with a lot of mechanical developments. We also developed portable horse-drawn engines. We worked in steam engines that were both portable as well as transportable. So when we were able to develop the steam engine that was pulled by horses for threshing, we were able to allow farmers and agriculturalists to take the mechanics to where the material was, as opposed to having to bring the material to where the mechanics were in the threshing. So that, again, was a revolutionary time that was moving the country forward. One of our developments was the sawmill. We had the Eclipse sawmill, which again was a stationary machine that was very precisely calibrated so that we could get the most out of every log and tree of wood and that was presented. So that became very popular as well. Of course, that being a stationary machine, we also were, we weren't the developers of, but we capitalized on and were able to bring to a higher level some traction machines, very often now called tractors. But traction machines, again, revolutionized what we're able to do with agriculture. We premiered one of our traction machines at the Ohio State Fair in Columbus. We even brought it to the Butler County Fair. We had hundreds of people following us as we took this machine over rough country, into the mud, out of the mud, and kept moving forward. It was just revolutionary for its time and so exciting that not only could it be used in farming, as we had many agriculturalists and farmers who would send us letters of thanks and recommendation, but also those who would then use it for other areas. For instance, in the logging area, this traction machine became very popular in the logging areas, would do the work of 4, 5, 6, 8 horses and be able to move through rough country where only horses could go before. So I wanted to give you a little bit of the background of some of the developments that we were able to move forward with right here in Hamilton. During the Civil War, we were one of the largest companies in the country. While there was a depression going on not long after the war, we were prospering, and we were able to employ quite a number of people in this area, especially with that large factory. At that time, it was Powell and Heaton Streets where the factory was located. So we were able to move forward. We were getting to a point that we were able to be very successful. And that's why I wanted to give you some of the background about how I was able to get to the point of bringing what I thought was very important facility to Hamilton, that the city and the community of Hamilton should have a place where people, especially young people, would have a place to gain knowledge, and that there would be open doors where they were welcome and to be able to sit, gain knowledge, enjoy, and improve themselves in their life. And that was my hope and my dream for this library. I would like to continue on. I could tell you many more things about the house, and as a matter of fact, what we'll do later on this evening after the presentation, my mother, Rosanna, and I will be available. We'll be walking through the house and the library, very willing to talk with you about the structure and the history that went into this area. But right now, I'd like to introduce the current director of the Lane Libraries, if I could, Mr. Joe Greenwood.
Well, I feel incredibly underdressed going after Mr. Lane. There's a good reason for that. I had kind of a Ken Bone moment where I put on a suit and it's not going to work, and I didn't have a bright red sweater to compensate. I've been caring for twins for the past 8 months. We just had them 8 months ago, and apparently my activity level has gone to 0 and my waistline has expanded in proportion. So this is the best I could do. I apologize. In all seriousness, though, it's an honor and a privilege to be representing the Lane Libraries as we celebrate our 150th anniversary. And to be doing so in front of the original building constructed 150 years ago by Clark Lane is really something special. For those of you good at math, you'll have figured out that this means the building was opened in 1866, and 2 years after that, Lane gifted it to the city of Hamilton. That makes it now one of the oldest continuously operating public libraries in the state of Ohio. Now, this building looks absolutely beautiful today, thanks largely to the work of Carol Bowling and my predecessor, Mary Pat Essman, and all the directors and managers that came before them. But it has been through a lot, including seeing significant damage during the Great Miami River Flood of 1913, a fairly significant fire in 1919, and twice seeing damage from lightning strikes, which seems statistically improbable, but I guess when a building's that old, anything's possible. Through all that, though, this library has remained committed to Clark Lane's vision of an institution that is accessible to everyone and that serves the entire community. In addition to fulfilling that vision at this location, the Lane Libraries have expanded to carry that same vision throughout the western half of Butler County. Expansions have included adding bookmobile services in 1938, the opening of the Booker T. Washington Community Center Library in 1946, the Lindenwold branch in 1948, our first library in Oxford in 1958, our first location in Fairfield in 1964. We added the Smith Library of Regional History in 1981, and most recently the Lane Community Technology Center in 2012. You can learn about all these expansions in our history and the history of Clark Lane in this handsome new sesquicentennial history that we have. They're available for free in the library after the program here. Many thanks to Kurt Ellison, who edited the book, and Carol Bowling, who put a lot of work into it, and Carrie Mancuso and Mandy Thoman for designing it, and the Smith Charitable Trust for helping finance it, and the numerous contributors that made this handsome publication possible. All the success we've had through the years can be attributed to Clark Lane's original vision, but even more so, the sustained and enthusiastic support from this community over the past 150 years. The value that this community places on its public library is truly unique, and all of us at Lane sincerely thank all of you for that. Before I turn this over, there are a few individuals that I'd like to thank that have helped make tonight and the rest of our 150th anniversary celebration possible. We had a committee that worked on our 150th celebration, and the committee members included Dave Ballou, Mary Pat Essman, Jim Blunt, Jim Schwartz, Kurt Ellison, John Guidugli, Kathy Creighton, Aaron Hufford, Ann Berg, Gracia Banta, Rebecca Smith, Ryan Gay, Carrie Mancuso, and Fran Meyer, and most importantly, Carol Bowling, who chaired the committee and has spent many, many hours over the past year working on this. And I know that's right, thank everybody. And I know she's thrilled and enjoying this event, but I also know that she will be very glad when tomorrow rolls around and she can take a deep breath. I also want to thank the trustees of the Lane Library, Eva Kessler, Kurt Ellison, Sonia Crambuel, Kelly Johnson, Daniel Hall, Ted Pickrell, and Sandra Paisano for supporting all of the events that we have arranged for this year. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to John Guidugli, who is the president and CEO of the Hamilton Community Foundation.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us this evening at this great event to celebrate the 150th anniversary of the Lane Public Libraries. On behalf of the Hamilton Community Foundation, I offer my thanks and congratulations to the library for all its many contributions to the quality of life in our community over these many, many years. This event also gives us an opportunity to celebrate on this new plaza. What a great space to bring folks together to celebrate as neighbors and as members of one community. As you know, the foundation's located in the Lane Hooven House, originally the home of Clark Lane. We at the foundation are also grateful to Clark Lane for many things. First of all, for the remarkable home that he built that serves as a great location for us. It seems so appropriate that the Hamilton Community Foundation is located in the former home of Mr. Lane, certainly one of Hamilton's first and most impactful philanthropists. In addition to the creation of the Lane Library, Clark Lane was instrumental in the creation of the Children's Home on South D Street and was known throughout the community as a generous leader who lent his assistance to many groups working to help fellow citizens in our community. The other thing about Clark Lane that always strikes me is his resilience. His ability to face challenges and rise to the occasion over and over again. Both in his business and his personal life, Mr. Lane faced many obstacles, but always found a way to persevere and to overcome. And I think Clark Lane's life is an example for us and for our community. When I look around at our community today, I see much of the same fortitude that Clark Lane displayed. I see a place that has experienced greatness, but has also experienced challenges. And I see a community that chooses to focus on the greatness and focus on the opportunities to achieve greatness. Look around this town today and see the many exciting projects and changes that are going on. Clark Lane was certainly a pioneer in creating opportunities for his neighbors and for his community. Today, he remains an inspiration, someone that we can look to as we aspire to make a positive impact on our world. What better role model than a man who believed in the importance of providing educational opportunities to those in the community? Thank you to Clark Lane for the lesson he provided to all of us. Thank you for the dedication. Thank you for the generosity. Thank you for the inspiration. We are grateful for all that we received from Clark Lane, and we are grateful for the library that he created and the many contributions of the Lane Library from 1866 through today. And it's now my pleasure to introduce the Mayor of Hamilton, Honorable Pat Moeller.
Well, good evening. And what a great birthday party this is. The music, the Plaza location, the food, it's all great. And the Lane Public Library, what a treasure, a true treasure we have in Hamilton, Fairfield, and Oxford. And about last night, what a tremendous lecture that was. An historian, a researcher, an accurate storyteller like David McCullough here in Hamilton, Ohio. What a way to throw a 150th birthday party by bringing him to this town. I heard Judge Eva Kessler say it was spectacular, and I think that word fits it very, very well. It was spectacular last evening. Before I read a proclamation, I want to say that one of my first, biggest, best steps was stepping up onto a bookmobile back in the 1960s. I mean, that opened up really my entire world in a lot of ways. I was going to get me my own book, and I got my own book. I've read a lot of books since then, but that bookmobile, I'll tell you, helped change my life. And thank you, whoever dreamed up the bookmobile. That was just great. And now I'm going to do something I've never done before, which is give a proclamation to a 200-year-old person. Mr. Lane, if you'll come on up here, I'm going to give this proclamation to you. Probably the last time I give one to someone who's 200 years old. Well, Clark Lane, thank you for your philanthropy, for the free library, for the job creation, because I'm sure you created jobs back in the day, and you helped make Hamilton, no doubt about that. I'm going to read this proclamation and award it to you, and please share it with your mother. I'm not sure how old she is now, but Office of the Mayor proclamation. Whereas Hamilton City Council and City Administration would like to recognize the 150th anniversary of the Lane Public Library in Hamilton, Ohio. And whereas the library was founded by Clark Lane, the son of Northwest Territory pioneers, Clark was an industrious man who helped revolutionize farming into profitable agriculture, was the founder of Owens, Lane, and Dyer Machine Company that became the genesis of Hamilton, Ohio's metal trades manufacturing, built one of the Hamilton's premier Victorian homes, and established the Butler County Children's Home. Whereas Clark Lane saw the importance of education and created a free library, the beginning step of today's Lane Library system that he donated to the people of Hamilton. And whereas a late 19th century admirer wrote, "The name and generous deeds of Clark Lane will never fade from the memories of a grateful people who have been recipients of his favor." And whereas the sentiment holds true even today, as the Lane Libraries have made it their mission to foster the community's culture and creativity, support the community's interest in reading, personal growth and learning, keep their community connected and competitive in a digital world, and help families and youth in the community build a strong future. And whereas the Lane Public Libraries provides materials, services, and technology aimed at satisfying the curiosity, intellect, and imagination of their patrons throughout our community. And whereas the Lane Libraries are community centers providing a host of free resources that serve the various needs of users, including over 350,000 items for checkout, access to research databases, classes, meeting room spaces, online learning resources, community outreach, and more. The Lane Libraries serve approximately 160,000 patrons in Hamilton, Fairfield, Oxford, and the surrounding communities through traditional library locations in each of those cities. A bookmobile, a community technology center, and Smith Library of Regional History. Now, therefore, I, Pat Moeller, Mayor of the City of Hamilton, Ohio, members of Hamilton City Council, do hereby recognize on October 13th, 2016, the 150th anniversary of the Lane Public Library, and encourage all members of the community to use the library system's various services and programs, as they are truly one of the treasures of our community. So by myself as mayor, acknowledged by all members of council. So, thank you, Mr. Lane, thank you very much. Thank you, sir. And that is yours.
Thank you. Sure, I'll share this with Mom. Obviously, what this means is that there have been a lot of wonderful caretakers of this library through the years and past, and especially present. And this also means the community has been a caretaker of the library, because the library would not continue without the community involvement. So this does belong to the library, but it also belongs to the community. So this is a gift to the community. Thank you, Mayor. I'm in an awkward situation right now. I'd like to introduce someone who has made a number of trips to Hamilton, has been involved with the library, someone that I don't know, but I should know, but have met tonight, because she's my great-great-granddaughter. I'd like to, if I could, please introduce to you Susie Hull.
Hello, everyone. My husband Jim and I are so happy to be here for the library anniversary. When I was first invited to say a few words, I must admit I wondered what I could possibly bring to this extraordinary celebration. And then I remembered the letters Clark Lane wrote to his wife Sally and his young son Jacob in 1862, when he traveled to the West on business. Our son Caleb discovered these letters tied with a ribbon in Lane's letterbox nearly 20 years ago at my mother's home, soon after she passed away. To me, these letters are so touching and so beautifully written, and bring to light yet another side of Clark Lane, apart from the philanthropist and businessman. And, as is quite fitting for tonight's occasion, in them he mentions books. By this time in his life, 1862, Lane had become a successful businessman here in Hamilton. He and Sally had been married for 16 years, and they had had 8 children, but so sadly, only 2 were living. Jacob, who was 8 at that time, and Harry, or Hattie, who was 4. Lane himself was still not completely recovered from his second bout of typhoid fever. In April, James Lyon, a good friend of Lane's, invited him to come along on a trip to California. The Owens, Lane, and Dyer partners agreed that this could benefit the business along the West Coast, and so off went the 2 friends. But of course, this meant the family would be separated for many months. In these letters to Jacob, Lane shared many new adventures with the children and advised and encouraged them as best he could at a great distance. This is the letter he wrote when aboard the steamer Northern Light, sailing from New York to Aspinwall on the east coast of Panama. He went from there overland to the west coast of Panama, where he boarded the Golden Age and sailed up the coast to San Francisco, which would be his headquarters during the trip. Caribbean Sea, April 18, 1862. My dear son, Jakey, Father writes you today from afar, off farther than he ever before was from you and dear little Hattie. And still he is going farther, yes, farther by thousands of miles. Paul hopes that you and Harry are well and that you are good boys, kind children and obeying Mother in all things, doing all things quick and cheerfully that Mother, Kate, and Maggie tell you. I hope that you will not throw stones, fight the boys on the street, or go in bad company. And I want you to study your books, some at home, but not to go to school this summer. Get Mother to show you on the globe where I now am and the way that I am yet to go. Study it so that when I come home, you can show me the whole route that I have passed over. Now I will tell you what I have seen here in this great ocean of water. Today I sat upon the deck of our boat as you and I did when on the Planet and Seaboard, and watched the great porpoises roll and tumble in the water. Some are nearly as large as an ox. You must examine your books and see if you can't find a picture of the porpoise. Then I saw thousands of flying fish. They are from 6 to 15 inches long. They raise out of the water like quails out of the grass, and fly or sail out from the boat 200 or 300 yards and then dive again into the water like shooting your arrow into water from your bow. I will now stop and write more soon. Be a good boy, play with and kiss Ma and Hattie for me. A father who loves you. This next letter was written to Jacob in mid-August toward the end of the trip. Red Bluffs, California, August 18, 1862. Well, Jakey, I can't write you much of interest this time. It is so hot and uncomfortable. But I can tell you of the 2 large elk that I saw. You must hunt up the picture of an elk in some of our books. Well, I saw at or near Portland, Oregon, 2 very large animals of this kind with great pronged horns so large that they could not begin to get through any of the doors of our house. Those elk were about as large as a small horse, were tame, and their owner puts harnesses on them, hitches them to a light buggy or sleigh, and you had better believe they make it travel over the ground. Don't you think it would be nice for us to have them in Hamilton? The streets are so pretty and level. But I don't think I could bring them home even if I had them, so we will try to get along with horses. I might, though, if they could be caught, bring 2 of those big-eared rabbits. You would laugh to see them running about the fields and plains. They look so queer, are nearly as high as the seat of a chair, and with ears much longer than this piece of paper from corner to corner. Guess I can prove that when I get home. The proper name of the animal is hare, but folks here all call them the jackass rabbit, and I guess that's the best name for them. Please be a good boy till I come. Kiss Hattie and tell him I will soon be home. Your Pa. Clark Lane would begin his trip home in late September of 1862. He traveled overland, and by the time he reached Hamilton in October, he will have traveled over 13,000 miles and been away 6 months. And I imagine by then he was eager to sit Jacob on one knee and Hattie on the other and delight them for many more nights with his tales of the West. Thank you.
I'm blushing. Much too modest to go any further with that. But I would like to introduce you to another relative, actually not directly from my line, but from my brother. You actually may have not realized that you have seen him on this thing called a television. Is that right? There's something called something about antiques and roadshow. Very confusing. But he is a relative of one of my brothers. I'd like to introduce you to Christopher Lane.
Thank you, Uncle. It's a real honor, and I thank the library and the foundation for inviting me here. I love to come to Hamilton. I'm something of a genealogist, and the Lanes settled in this area just to the south of here, and I'm going to just put a little bit into context the history of the Lanes, because Clark Lane is I think a very good example of who the Lanes were as a family, and something which I can't take credit for, but I'm proud of. Clark Lane descended from a family which came to America from the Netherlands in 1663. His immigrant ancestor was called Matthias Lanen van Pelt, the surname indicating that the family originally came from a Belgian town called Overpelt, and their name was anglicized to Lane after the Dutch New Netherland became New York later in the century. The Lanes were a family known for their skill in industry, their faithfulness to their beliefs, and, as evidenced by the immigration to the New World, by their readiness to explore new opportunities in new places. This last characteristic was further demonstrated when the Lanes moved from New York to rural New Jersey at the beginning of the 18th century, and then again at the end of the century when the Aaron Lane family packed all their belongings and trekked by wagon and then boat over 600 miles through the forest and down the river to the just opening up Northwest Territory. Landing in Cincinnati in 1797, Aaron Lane and his wife Sarah and their 6 children set off through the, quote, unbroken forest to a spot about 10 miles north of Cincinnati, pretty much just a little bit south of here. They there built a cabin said to be the first permanent building in Springfield Township. In 1813, Aaron built a blacksmith shop on his property along the road between Cincinnati and Hamilton, today's Hamilton Avenue. And about 20 years later, the Lanes put up a new home on the property next to the smithy. Both of these buildings still stand today, although the smithy is a wreck. The property is at the intersection of Mill Avenue and Hamilton Avenue. The Lane were amongst the earliest settlers in Hamilton County, north of Cincinnati, with many of the descendants of Aaron and Sarah settling in and around what became known as the town of Mount Healthy. And the extended family played an important role in the development of the area as farmers and as blacksmiths. The Lanes also played an important role in the social fabric of their community. They were among the founders of the New Burlington Church in 1816, and some of the earliest members of the Mount Healthy Christian Church, founded in 1839. Their moral activities extended well beyond this, for from as early as 1841, members of the extended Lane family became active in the anti-slavery movement in southwestern Ohio, including, it is said, their property being used as a stop on the Underground Railroad. Clark Lane was a true son of the Lanes, for when he turned 21, his first vote was for the presidential candidate for the anti-slavery Liberty Party. This vote led to his being, in effect, driven from Hamilton, where he had lived, not returning again for 2 years. Clark's stand against slavery and is using much of his wealth for the public library in Hamilton, as well as other local communities, projects, was very much part of the moral influence the Lane family had in the area. Why I cannot claim any credit for this, I am proud to be descended from this family. It moves me greatly to be able to see the wonderful and vibrant Lane library system, which was inspired by and founded by Clark Lane, to visit the original Lane homestead down the way, and especially to see the Lane smithy, which is on that property, which may have been a stop on the Underground Railroad. Now, I do feel great sadness to see the current state of that building. It's basically collapsed, although the walls are still there. But I hope maybe one day it'll be preserved. But I am delighted to see the Clark Lane home and the original Clark Lane building so well restored, maintained, and used and appreciated in today's world. And I am really delighted to be here for this wonderful event to celebrate what is the outgrowth of Clark Lane's evidencing and realization of what I think the Lane family brought to this community. So thank you for inviting me to this ceremony and for celebrating the importance of Clark Lane's influence in the community.
Again, thank you to the library, the Community Foundation, Carol Bowling, wonderful job, and thank you to the community of Hamilton for continuing with the Lane Public Library. Have a good evening.